Welcome to Wisdom from the Aerial View, the podcast for those who wish to learn how to crush their anxiety and find meaning and purpose in their lives. Today's podcast is going to be a little bit different because we need to be honest with the folks. We just did a podcast about time and that the world is not what you think it is and that all time is happening at the same time in its contempt. It was terrific. The jukebox of time, that all the records are going and they're playing at the same time, and that the conversations that we had with our parents a long time ago are still going on. And that, to me, is actually kind of nice. I miss my parents. I'd like to talk to them. Sometimes I do. I will tell you a little secret about me, Dr. Mark Klein. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Sometimes when I'm really a little bit down, I'll get in my car when there's nobody around and I talk to my mother. Kind of crazy. Crazier still that she doesn't answer back, but I do that. That's my conscious mind, I guess, talking to my mother. At the end of the podcast, you said something about, we want to talk about, in a future podcast, about consciousness. And then I said, you know what? Let's do it. I'm totally unprepared. And maybe you are too, except you thought a lot about it. I haven't. And I said, you know what? Let's just do it. Let's talk about consciousness. So what is it, Dr. Mark Klein, author of the book, Wisdom from the Aerial View, the superpower that can change your life in this world? What is it about consciousness that you really want to talk about?
Well, hello, Enid.
Hello.
Great to see you. There's so many ways we can go with this. And I think I think this is kind of fun because usually, by the way, Enid is always well prepared. She's a true professional in everything she does. And so she rarely sits down at a microphone without knowing what she's going to talk about.
This is true.
I'm not quite as disciplined as she is. And in all fairness, since we're spending most of this podcast on stuff that I've written and thought about a long time, I do have a distinct advantage. So, but this time we're both at an equal disadvantage, but I think it'll make it fun. Let me just start with what you're saying about driving around talking to your mother. So it's not weird at all. I'm going to guess that, I'll pick a number, 75% of people on this planet talk to their deceased family members at some point or another. I think it's quite natural. But here's the cool thing about it. So when we do that, we assume we're talking to somebody who's no longer here, right? We can't pick up the phone. I think I've told you sometimes I just get this urge to call my mother as if I can. I forget that I can't. And I said, I'm going to call my mother and tell her this. And of course, she's been gone a long time. I can't do that. But it tells us something about, there's something in our heads that we don't really appreciate, because what I'm getting at is that we have a sense of the existence of life after it leaves this earth. So there are people who are religious who believe in the hereafter, or heaven, hell, whatever. But even if you don't have a religion, there's this instinctual sense in us that we can in some way communicate with those who are no longer here. I don't mean a seance or something like that. I mean, we just feel it. We feel the connection. We've talked about connections on this podcast before in an earlier episode. We can probably revisit it at some point because it's so interesting. But we have this sense. And where does that come from? Well, I can't give you the answer, but we talked about last time how the world is not what we think. There are things that we don't understand about life and death and what happens before and what happens after. These are really strange concepts, and it leads us to the concept of consciousness, because what consciousness has in common with those ideas of pre-life, post-life, whatever, is that nobody understands it. So you would think here we are in the year 2025 with all these tremendous scientific advancements, incredible computing power, AI, et cetera, we'd have a better idea what consciousness is. So if somebody tells you they know what consciousness is, you should smile and be very polite, but in the back of your mind going, this person really doesn't know what they're talking about, because nobody knows, right? They may be right, but they equally could be wrong. Nobody really knows. But I think about consciousness in a lot because I have to make it fit into the things that I do know about how the world works. We talked a lot about aging and about
time. Tell me your definition. Before we go on, we're talking about consciousness. Let's set the ground rules. What is your definition of consciousness? What are we talking about?
So you're the definition woman. Could usually come in here and go, I looked it up, and then
right, but I didn't have time to look it up,
or someplace else. The Oxford English, Oxford. What's Oxford English?
Yes.
What's that?
Yeah.
Well, your dictionary, right? OED, Oxford English Dictionary. I think that's what it is, right? You usually come in with, you're usually prepared with this, but today you're not. So so I don't know what the legitimate or accepted definition of consciousness is, but it's kind of like pornography. You know when you see it, right? You're awake. You know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You have a mind that's thinking, reacting in the moment, able to process
Just being
memories.
aware of what's going on.
Yeah, all the things that our brains
Okay.
do, right?
Okay.
We recall memories,
Okay.
we process
Okay.
current information, we make decisions, we evaluate what our senses are telling us. This is all consciousness, right? So I'm not a neuroscientist,
Okay.
and I'm sure there are neuroscientists out there who can give us
Well,
some
I am.
who can
So,
give us some great definitions. Or you know what we could do? This is kind of fun, just so that we don't fall off the wagon here. We could ask ChatGPT. Let's do that.
all right.
Can you give me a definition of consciousness? And let's see what it says. It says, drum roll, please. Oh, that's a profound question. One that philosophers, neuroscientists, and psychologists have wrestled with for centuries.
See there?
There isn't a single universally accepted definition, but here's a concise synthesis that captures the main perspectives. Consciousness is a state or quality of being aware of and able to think about one's own existence, sensations, thoughts, and surroundings. So I think we covered it pretty well. We did pretty well.
Okay, good.
Okay, so we like to talk about aging or the advancement of time or moving through our lives. I know that's obviously you deal with the elderly every single day. So you're quite familiar with aging and that process.
And so does your wife.
Very good. Excellent. You're scoring at home. That's a big, we're going to give her 2 points. That's a 2-pointer for Enid. Right?
Okay.
At any rate, so we think about aging and moving along in life, but we think about that in terms of our bodies. We don't think about that in terms of our minds. So yeah, we know more than we did before, or we knew more about some things, we've forgotten a lot, whatever. But we don't look at our minds the same way we look at our, like our limbs or our joints or our hair or lack of hair. We don't look at it that way. It's a different entity. So what is actually going on? So if you believe in a soul, which many people do, that there's a difference between the mind and the body, even though they work together for sure. They definitely are related. Otherwise, I like to say your mind and your body do work together, but they're not necessarily the best of friends, right? So, but they are. There is a sense that they are, even though they're related, they are distinct entities. Because if our brains were in charge of our bodies, we wouldn't have pains. We wouldn't get, unable to run as fast as we could or do the things we could. So I'm kind of joking, but we recognize them as distinct in some ways, at least, right?
Right.
So what's happening as you move from, you're the 3-year-old, at preschool to where we are now, and our bodies clearly, if we took sequential pictures we do that all the time. Now that we take pictures ubiquitously, if you go back on your phone, for instance, the first image I have on my phone is from the year 2000. So that's 25 years ago. And I see pictures of me 25 years ago, and I don't look exactly the same. I had a little more hair, and it certainly wasn't the color it is now. I had more wrinkles, and et cetera, et cetera. But what about my brain? What about my consciousness? What happened to my consciousness? Well, it's still going. I'm still appreciating, according to that definition, I'm still aware. I'm still evaluating this information coming from my 5 senses, and I'm still doing all those things. So what exactly is this thing that's floating, in a sense, from one age to another, from one moment to the other? So if you lined up pictures of your body for the last 25 years, we'll take that as an arbitrary number, and you watch the changes in your body, and then what's been happening in your consciousness since that time, you would say, well, it's made a lot of decisions, it's evaluated things, it's observed things, but it's really not a whole lot different. It has more experiences in it. Maybe I forgot a few things. Maybe the memories aren't as good. New memories have been made. But basically, the thing that we call consciousness hasn't really changed all that much during that time. What's going on? So the image that I've had recently in my head, this is totally ascientific. This is based on nothing other than trying to figure this out. Because, I spend a lot of time thinking about crazy things like this. Imagine as if your brain or your consciousness, let's leave brain out of this, because I think brain and consciousness are different.
Yeah.
Now, most neuroscience would say, no, you can't differentiate consciousness and brain, but I'm going to differentiate them. And I don't have good scientific reasons to do this, but just humor me for a little bit. Let's just call them something different. Let's leave the brain as part of the body and consciousness as something else. You can call it the soul. I don't really care what you call it, but let's call it something else. Now imagine if you lined up those pictures of 25 years of your body changing. You wouldn't notice it from 1 minute to the next or one day from the next, but over the course of months, you met a little change, and then a couple of years, you notice a change, and wow, it's a pretty big change over 25 years, right? What's this thing called consciousness? So I'm now imagining it in a sense of something that is moving in some type of medium outside the body that is continually moving from picture to picture to picture. So you got the pictures lined up. Now we have something called our consciousness, our soul, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to just use those interchangeably because it's just easy. Imagine that invisibly gliding through the images of your body. It's just moving from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. It's just moving right through them like this invisible entity that has neither form nor substance nor mass. It's just this thing that I can't describe. I can't put my hands around. I can't contain, but it is moving from picture to picture to picture over those 25 years, or in fact, over our entire lifetime. Let's just stick to these 25 years of pictures, right? This is a fascinating idea because it cannot be the same as your body. It is not going through the same aging process. It's different. It's a different process. And in fact, your consciousness, unless you've had a serious brain injury or serious illness dementia. And we'll talk about that a little bit today also, because I find that equally fascinating. We have mentioned it before, but we're going to stick to that. We're going to incorporate this because the whole thing is so cool. Let me digress, as I often do. You know that I become an iconoclast. I no longer pay any attention to conventional wisdom. I no longer take what anybody says, no matter who it is, at the highest levels, no matter how expert they are. I don't care who they are. I respect everybody, but I don't take anything at face value anymore about anything. Why? Why have I become this iconoclast? I used to always color in the lines. Why? Because I've learned that conventional wisdom eventually will almost always turn out to be wrong, that there are too many things we don't understand about the world. You know, you and I have talked about facts. Facts and science have changed. The great one was the one we talked about in a previous episode, that Isaac Newton said there was a clockwork universe. There was a universal clock that ticked off the same for everybody. He did that in the 1600s. And it wasn't until 300 years later that Einstein said, "Oh, guess what? That's wrong. That fact of science, that fact of a universe is wrong." And there's so many of those in science, so many. Not just in physics, of all things. Physics, you would think physics is set in stone. In the year 1899 or something in that time period, most physicists thought there wasn't a lot left to discover. We had to clean up some loose ends, a couple things we really didn't get. There were some problems. I don't want to minimize it, but we'd covered most of it. Well, it turns out we hadn't covered any of it, right?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So that's the point. So that's why I'm an iconoclast. That's why when it comes to consciousness, when it comes to the things we talk about in this podcast, I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. I'm just trying to say, keep your open mind, understand we know very little about how the world works and about how our lives work and what it all means. So you need to keep an open mind. This idea of consciousness, what does it mean? What is it? This consciousness, this soul, what is it? Is it a distinct entity? Well, I'm convinced it is. Then people would say to me, well, if you have a stroke or other kind of brain injury, well, there goes your consciousness to a large degree, right?
Maybe.
And I would say, who says, right? And I'm a science guy, right? I've viewed thousands and thousands of MRIs and CTs of the brain, right? I'm a science guy, right? This is what I did. And I go, well, okay, that's nice, but it doesn't tell you what's behind that. So the brain controls our body, our senses, our motor ability.
The mind-body connection?
Yes, we need a brain to run the show. It's the computer that runs the show, right? If the computer goes bad, you can't speak, you might lose memories, you can't communicate appropriately, you can't move, whatever. It doesn't mean this thing that's conscious or the soul is impaired. It means that it can't be expressed. Now, perhaps it is true that the mind, the brain, and consciousness are the same, and therefore, no, I'm wrong. Consciousness is the brain, and therefore it is injured when we have a stroke, and it is affected by any kind of intracranial problem, etc. But I'm beginning to believe it's not. And the reason I'm beginning to believe it's not is because all the clues we've talked about over, and even things like near-death experiences where so many people say, well, I'm floating above the bed and I can hear the doctors talking. This is old news. This is nothing new, right? You take all the clues together and all the things we've talked about in this podcast, and it is perfectly possible. I'm not trying to sell anybody anything, and I don't want people to think that I'm this crazy, mad person who has decided science is wrong. No, science is incomplete. It's not wrong. It's incomplete. And so we don't understand consciousness, and we probably don't understand it for a reason, because it's probably in some ways outside at least part of the realm of the science that we can actually decipher. So when somebody has dementia, for instance, it's very sad. We watch this person struggle to function in the world. We watch the people who love this person struggle. We watch these people who try and care for this person struggle. I'm not minimizing any of this. It is difficult for everybody involved, but it doesn't mean that consciousness is impaired or gone or not still involved in the human being we see in front of us. It doesn't mean that. We don't know. We can't evaluate what we don't understand. We don't have the tools for it yet. Now, perhaps in the next 10, 20, 100 years, we will. And everything I'm saying now will proven to be false. It's totally possible. But right now, from what I've learned in medicine and what I've seen in my life and the things we talk about, I'm very skeptical. I do have this sense that their consciousness is something else, that this idea of a soul that's been around since the dawn of time, certainly in every religion, in one form or another, there's something to it. I can't explain it. Again, I'm not trying to sell anybody anything, but I do think there's something to it. And the way I like to look at it now, the way I've been forced to look at it, not that I want to look at it, is I look at this formless, massless entity moving through the images of our body over our lifespans. The body changes. It's very visible, especially year to year or decade to decade, very visible. Moment to moment, not so easy. The changes are occurring. We just can't appreciate it. But over months and certainly years, we can. But that thing that we call consciousness, that's not changing the same way. That's not going through the same process. Something else is happening. And so that's why, even though the mind and body, yes, they are absolutely 100% connected in some ways, they're not the same. There's something else.
It's interesting. There was an article in this morning's Washington Post, and it's about a chorus for folks who have Alzheimer's. And these are all, I guess, in some assisted living facility, they have Alzheimer's, and they decided to start a chorus. And it's a chorus of them and their caretakers or their husband and wives, whatever. And one of the husbands said something interesting when I was reading the column this morning. He said, my wife, who is very much into the throes of dementia, doesn't remember what she had for breakfast, but there's not one lyric that she doesn't remember. She remembers everything from the past. So it's her conscious mind, maybe, and I was reading it thinking, well, maybe what she had for breakfast is so unimportant that it didn't matter, that she's conscious of what was important, the things in her life that were important. So maybe while her outward body has changed, and even the short-term memory of her mind, but the longer-term memory of her is still there. Her conscious mind it's still there. It's just in a different place than where we expect it to be.
Well, let's talk about three different elements here. Yeah. One is short-term memory and long-term memory are not stored in the same place in the brain.
Right.
So it's certainly what happens is certain areas in dementia are affected differently than other areas.
Correct.
So it's perfectly,
right.
We see a lot of people who have short-term memory loss and the long-term memories are fantastically intact. Okay, so that's entity one, short-term memory, entity two, long-term memory. And then there's the third component, which is the part that we can't see, which is really what we're talking about, the essence of the human being.
That's right.
The consciousness.
Right.
So where does that fit in? It's different than the memories. It's different than short-term and long-term memory. It's something else. It's this sense of who we are. It's, again, formless, massless, invisible. It's consciousness. It's soul. We don't know what it is, right? And I am more sold than ever that this is a separate entity, that it's not short-term memory or long-term memory. It's not motor. It's not sensory. It's not the actual mechanical fibers and the cells, the neurons in the brain. It's something else. Now, I can't prove it. Someday I may be proven completely wrong. Someday, 20, 50 years from now, somebody might pull up this podcast and start laughing and think this dodo thought he was onto something and he was completely wrong. It's all easily explainable now in science. And if that happens, fine. It's not the first time I've been wrong. I don't think so right now. And knowing what I know, if you pushed me, I'm going to end up on the side of this formless, massless thing that we call consciousness or soul that we can't explain. I think it's an individual entity. And like I said, it moves through our bodies as we age from one moment to the next. That's why I like this image of lining up pictures of yourself over 25 years. And you clearly see the difference in you from those moments. You look at the first picture and then 25 years to the last picture and you don't look the same. Right? Nobody does. Some people look better than others, but everybody looks different, right? But that thing that we call consciousness, that hasn't changed that much. It's changed a little. It's been affected by things that have happened in our lives and in our world and so on. But the idea of who we are, that consciousness, that hasn't aged 25 years. That's still, the essence of it is really still pretty much the same. How is that? It can't be the same as the brain and all the other physical parts of our body. It cannot be the same. Something else is going on. Inexplicable at the moment. Perhaps it will always be inexplicable. I don't know. Maybe when we leave this earth, we run into God and God says, oh, yeah, I can explain that to you. Here's what it really is. Yeah, you were right. It's your soul. Isn't that great? So, right. And by the way, here's your grade for how you did in your life.
Yeah. But why do you say, I guess my question for you is, obviously, when I look at pictures 25 years, it has changed. Everything changes. But you say that the consciousness hasn't. Well, how do you know it hasn't?
Well, I didn't say it hasn't. I said it hasn't changed the same as the rest of your body, right?
How do you know that?
Okay, that's a fair question. What I'm saying is the sense of who we are and and that you are Enid Borden. That's not, you were Enid Borden 25 years ago. Now, you have different opinion. Wait, hang on. You have different opinions. You have different facts in your life, different memories, different experiences, blah, 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 blah. But the Enid Borden part, who you are, that sense of who I am when you wake up in the morning and you open your eyes and you go, oh, I'm Enid Borden. I'm still here, right? That hasn't evolved in the same way as your body has evolved. It's not, your consciousness hasn't gotten gray hair. You don't have gray hair. I do, but you know what I'm saying? It's different. The evolution is different. It's not the same. I'm not saying it hasn't changed at all. It changes based on your experiences and what goes on in your world and so on. But the essence of who you are has not changed the same as your body. Your consciousness is not obviously 25 years older. It's not creaky. It's not, having trouble, expressing itself in that sense. That sense of who you are has not evolved the same as your body. It's a different entity. I'm not saying it doesn't change or get molded in one way or another by experience. It does, but it's not the same as what's going on in your body. It's a different process. Something else is going on. It's not, quote, aging in the same way your body is.
See, and I take issue with that because I think it is changing. I think if it's an awareness about things, one would hope, one would pray that my awareness has really improved. That even the way I look at the world has changed. As when we were children of the 60s, what I thought about in those years, I don't think about now. I think I look at it more maturely. And maybe that's a question here. Where does maturity fit in to consciousness?
So I think you bring up an excellent point. And I think part of the problem is that I am doing a lousy job expressing this concept that I have in my head and not articulating properly. So your body ages, right?
Yeah.
All I'm saying is take your, whatever we call conscious, whatever this awareness is of who we are and so on, and we compare it to what our body's doing over time. Mm-hmm. They are not the sense of who you are, the sense of Enid Borden. Mm-hmm. Yes, your opinions are changed. Your maturity has changed. You see things differently. But the fact of who you are, this essence of who you are that has been molded by your experiences in life and so on, it's not aging the same way as your body is. It is morphing, but it's not linear. It's not like every day your body is aging. Every single day. And over that 25 pictures, all those 25 years of pictures, you can see it. Right?
Yeah.
Our skin changes. I was with my grandchildren last weekend, and the 4-year-old looks under my neck and goes, "Hey, Pop." They call me Pop. What's that thing? Right? I go, I'm cracking up. He goes, "How come I don't have one of that?" I said, "Because you're 4, right? Right?
Yeah.
Right?" And
turkey.
The turkey thing. My grandkids and I, we have like most we have this fantastic relationship. They know I love them. We have a wonderful, wonderful relationship, all of them. And and of course, kids will say anything to you, but So he can see this, right? It's visible. If we look at our pictures, it's visible. But show me how, paint a picture to me of your consciousness. You were Enid Borden. You're Enid Borden with new experiences because you went through life, but you're still Enid Borden. Enid Borden. In fact, I recognize you as Enid Borden. And if I didn't have a single picture of you and I just talked to you, I can hear your voice. I can hear, not even your voice, I can hear who you are. I can hear the humor. I can hear your approach to life. I can hear your kindness and gentleness and your generosity. I hear all that. That's been around for years. It hasn't aged linearly like your body has. It's matured, as you said. It's grown. It's expanded. Let's use the word expanded. Your consciousness has expanded, right? You appreciate more. You're aware more. You take in the external world in a different way, perhaps, when you did when you were 16, of course. But the essence of Enid Borden is still Enid Borden. It hasn't aged linearly like your body has. That's the point I'm trying to make.
I see.
So there is something unique and different about consciousness or our soul, whatever you want to call it, different than our body. They are not the same thing. They're not one-to-one. Every part of your body is aging at a similar rate. Right?
Don't remind me. Yeah.
Everybody, give me an example. So I don't know if this has happened to you, but there's something called posterior vitreous detachment in your eye. The vitreous, which is the jelly part of the eyeball, it loses some of its elasticity because it literally gets dried out like the rest of us. It pulls away from the back of the eye. You get these floaters that float around. You often get sharp, bright lights in the periphery. So if you live long enough, everybody will get that. I think it's 100% will get that if they live long enough, right? Okay. It's an aging process. That's not happening to your consciousness. Your consciousness, in fact, is not aging. It's expanding, right? It's getting bigger. It's not losing its elasticity. It's gaining elasticity because it's now taken in so much more in terms of relationships and experiences and events. It's taken in so much more. So if you looked at your consciousness like a balloon, it was a little balloon when you're younger. Now it's a bigger balloon. Yeah. It's going the opposite direction of your body. They are unrelated. They are not attached. They are not the same thing. There is something unique about consciousness relative to our body. So yes, there's this mind-body collaboration, but that's really the brain and the body. It's not the consciousness and the body. They're different things. Consciousness to me is clearly, I wouldn't say clearly because that's too dogmatic and I could be wrong. But to me, it appears very strongly to be an outside entity, this formless, massless thing that is moving through those pictures of you over 25 years. And as it moves, it's actually growing. It's expanding. So if we could see it, it'd be bigger every single day. It'll get larger, more voluminous. It would have more things in it. It's going in the opposite direction of your body. This is what I should have said earlier. It would have been much clearer. One thing is shrinking and one thing is growing. The consciousness is growing, the body's shrinking. That's a better way to look at it. Consciousness is a different entity. It is fascinating. It is the essence of who we are. It's a super clue as to why we're here. If you tie it all together, this is what points to the fact that there is purpose, that they are here for a reason. So this consciousness is growing. Our body is the vehicle to carry it along. So you look at those 25 years of pictures, it's carrying along this consciousness with it. It's the vehicle, it's the method of transportation of getting that consciousness from when you were born to all the way through to the end of your life and building this thing, this soul, this consciousness. And that's why I think when you asked about dimension, what happens to our brains, it doesn't mean that our consciousness is necessarily affected. It's just can't be expressed the way it was before. It doesn't mean it's not still there. So
it'd be interesting to find out, seriously, to delve into that. I mean, when we look at someone who has brain injury or dementia or a stroke victim, we think that they've lost everything. But I guess your thesis is maybe not.
No, maybe not. I can't prove it. Yes, right. I believe it is. I believe it. I cannot prove it. We're trying to test something that is untestable, at least for now, and probably for a long time.
Yeah.
We can't test it. I can't be dogmatic. I can't say, yes, I'm absolutely sure I'm right.
But and in the process, we may be selling these folks short. We may be underestimating what's really going on up there. And
so you probably did the same thing. When my mother was on her last moments, because I know you were with your mother, her last moments.
Yes, I was.
You were in the hospital, I believe. My mother was home with me here. And I stood next to her. She had been unconscious or certainly not arousable or responsive for about a day. And I just stood next to her and I just told her that she was the most wonderful mother and that I loved her and I thanked her for everything she did for me. Now, I don't know if she heard a word of it. I have no idea.
Yeah.
You know, and most of us like to believe that they do, but there is a sense to me that gets through. And that's, you know, the brain might not be working properly. Certainly the body's not working properly. It's on its last moments. But it doesn't mean that thing we call consciousness is no longer there, or what we call, or can be referred to as soul. There's something else. And I don't know what it is. I just have watched this and thought about this. And, you know, yes, there's an advantage of being in medicine and understanding some of these things at a different level. But these are unscientific or ascientific things that we can't test. We can't prove. Everything I've said today might be complete fiction. I really don't think so, for the reasons I've elucidated. But there is something different between consciousness, this thing that is constantly expanding, and our bodies, which is constantly contracting. So, you know, it's a fascinating conversation. And,
Yes.
and again, I think it's a source of comfort, right? Just as long as that consciousness is increasing and expanding, which it is, you can't help it. It has to happen. Then we are making something of our lives up until the very last moment we're here.
And those are wonderful last words, and I appreciate them. And this was a good conversation because it was totally unscripted. Not that we're ever scripted, but it was just it's thoughtful, something to think about, continue to think about. And as I sit here shrinking, and hopeful that my consciousness is expanding, but my waist might be expanding. I'm not sure about that. But I thank you for this conversation.
I thank you for this conversation. It's great.
One of the things we need to do, I forget, we had one of our listeners said, tell us where we're supposed to write in.
Question@wisdomfromtheaerialview.com. Question@wisdomfromtheaerialview.com. So we'd love to hear from you. Thanks very much for listening. Enid, thank you for another great conversation. You're the best.
Thank you.
And everybody, thanks again. We'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. Peace.